Right, so we're told that Britain supposedly has the world's most rigorous arms controls, supposedly. It's a bit of a laughable thing considered, really, isn't it? Perhaps it would be better to regard them as rigorously ignored, wouldn't it? But UN investigators have now traced British-made weapons straight into the hands of Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, the same militia accused of genocide in Darfur and elsewhere. And the supplier, Britain's strategic partner, inverted commas, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, a state that bankrolls these mercenaries, builds illegal bases, and enjoys ongoing normalised relations with Israel, of course, all whilst Gaza starves and comes under renewed atrocity during a ceasefire where Israel never actually ceased firing. But on top of that, Israel is benefiting from the genocide in Sudan as well, as it has provided an alternative route for goods, avoiding the Red Sea and potential Houthi strikes. So what we got here is a cycle of genocide, where the UK arms the UAE, who appear to be handing said munitions to the RSF, which in turn is facilitating goods headed to Israel. It seems for the UK, complicity in one genocide just isn't enough. Right, so Sudan today is the world's largest internal displacement crisis. It's bigger than Gaza. UN OCHA figures show almost 9 million people uprooted, most from Darfur. Human Rights Watch has documented RSF-aligned forces conducting killings, sexual violence, and village clearances that match the legal pattern of crimes against humanity. This is the context in which British-made systems have been recovered. These are the realities of a documented atrocity. The government cannot claim ignorance here. It can only claim that other interests mattered more to it. Those interests run through the Gulf. The UAE is one of Britain's top arms customers. It's also Israel's partner under the Abraham Accords. And satellite imagery just published has also shown Emirati engineers constructing what looks like a new airstrip and military installation on Zucar Island, the Yemeni island that sits just north of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the south of the Red Sea. That base, together with the long-standing Emirati facility at Assab in Eritrea and the $6 billion port project on Sudan's coast, all forms a chain of military commerce outposts running up the length of the Red Sea. And it's marketed as stability. It operates as leverage as well. Whoever holds those ports and islands dictates the flow of energy and trade between Asia, Africa, Europe. The UAE wants a big fat slice of that. So when Britain sells the hardware that makes that control possible, it's not exporting security, it's renting out impunity. The history of the RSF ties all of these threads together as it happens. During the Saudi-UAE-led intervention in Yemen against the Ansar Allah movement, the Houthis, thousands of Sudanese fighters were deployed as coalition auxiliaries. Reporting at the time described monthly payments through Emirati banks and the use of RSF units in ground operations against Ansar Allah. That campaign ended without victory, of course, because nobody can seemingly beat the Houthis ever, can they? But it still created a battle-hardened Sudanese force financed and equipped by Abu Dhabi. When Sudan's power struggle kicked off just after 2021, those fighters returned home with that experience and their UAE patronage very much still in place. So the militia now accused of genocide in Sudan is the same formation the UAE once paid to fight the Houthis. And the equipment they use and the routes that supply them are all part of the same ecosystem, therefore. The product is a mercenary network trained in one war to be unleashed on another. After the events of October 7th, the Houthis, of course, began attacking Israeli-linked shipping in the Red Sea, and we know how effective they were at that. Carriers suspended transits, insurers hiked rates, the port of Eilat collapsed, basically went bust. It was widely reported after that shipping was rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope up to the Mediterranean, and all the costs went up associated with that. But another route has appeared, it seems. Port Sudan, although in the Red Sea itself, has not been seen to be a supplier to Israel. It's on the wrong coastline, after all, isn't it? And goods headed there, well, the Houthis haven't ever bothered with. Right now, with a ceasefire supposedly in place, they've suspended their actions just as they have on previous ceasefires. Yet Port Sudan has become a transit point for goods which are allowed passage by the RSF, presumably at the behest of their paymasters, the UAE, aligned to Israel as they are, all remanifested through Egyptian terminals into the Mediterranean, so Sisi seems to be in on this somewhere along the line as well. In this rerouted economy, therefore, the UAE's logistics and capital have provided a shortcut that is keeping Israeli-related trade moving via the Red Sea, despite the threat posed by the Houthis. The same state accused of arming Sudan's RSF is thus helping sustain Israel's supply lines right now during a war under ICJ scrutiny for plausible genocide. The circuit, therefore, completes itself, and of course we have to come to Britain's role in all of this as a result of that. Britain's weapons feed Emirati capacity. Emirati capacity arms Sudan's killers and stabilises Israel's commerce at the same time through that Port Sudan route. What the Houthis closed in defence of Gaza, Britain and its Gulf partners have found a way of circumventing. So the UK writes export criteria that ban licences where there's a clear risk of serious violations of international humanitarian law or diversion to an embargo conflict. The 2019 Court of Appeal ruling on Saudi Arabia and Yemen established what that meant. If the risk is clear, the licences have to stop. The matter of Israel and Gaza has shown that doesn't prove to be the case, of course. The UN briefings on Sudan, the amnesty warnings, the Guardian's investigation of recovered British kit in Sudan now that's just come out, all make that risk undeniable. So continuing approvals is not a technical lapse, as we should all know by now. It all comes down to political choice, doesn't it? The government did not fail to notice, it simply decided it was going to carry on. The official defence remains the same. Ministers recite that exports are assessed case by case and that Britain has one of the world's most rigorous regimes, but they omit the material fact that the same regime was already caught out once by the courts for licensing arms to a coalition committing war crimes in Yemen. They rely on the public not connecting the dots, but the pattern remains consistent. A Gulf partner accused of enabling atrocities, warnings received, licenses renewed, no ministers resigning over it. So the language tells you everything if you listen for it. Engagement means dependency. Strategic relationship means immunity. Britain's calls for adherence to the rules-based order while fueling the states very much breaking those rules. It invokes human rights in speeches and sells engines for armoured carriers found on battlefields where civilians were burned out of their homes. It demands accountability from adversaries and offers discretion to its clients. That contradiction is not a glitch, it's the governing principle of British foreign policy. It's obscene. The state that lectures others on restraint has been caught out, seemingly enabling the very crimes it claims to stop, once again. So the logistical map makes the connections all physical and it ties everything together. Reuters, for example, have tracked the surge in Red Sea freight costs and diversions since 2024. Plenty of other mainstream outlets have done the same. Egypt's terminals report increased throughput, so these are not hidden links at all. They're open data points. The British components found in Sudan are part of the same supply ecosystem that keeps those Red Sea routes alive. It's one network, arms, cargo, ports, and excuses, all feeding each other. Those British engines aren't just sitting in armoured cars in Khartoum, they're keeping the UAE's regional war machine humming from Zucar Island down to Assab and across to Port Sudan. That same machine is what keeps Israel's trade flowing while Gaza starves. Different wars, same logistics. Britain signs the licenses, the UAE moves the kit, Israel benefits from the cover, and ordinary people in Darfur and Gaza pay the price. When Whitehall rubber stamps another export license to the Emirates, it isn't supporting stability, it's underwriting a supply chain that links a genocide in Sudan to a siege in Gaza. The government calls it a strategic relationship. What it means is, we'll pretend not to see what you're doing as long as the check's clear and the press doesn't ask the wrong questions. Well, some of us are going to ask them. Ministers talk about stability and partnership and mutual trust, but what they're buying is deniability. Everyone already knows where this gear turns up. The UN documented it, Amnesty's shown it, Reuters has traced the serial numbers, The Guardian printed the story. But Downing Street keeps the tap open, because if they ever admit that British weapons are being used by the RSF, then the whole export control lie falls apart. The paperwork isn't protection, it's camouflage. It's not diplomacy either, it's a laundering operation for war crimes with polite language all wrapped around it. The UAE builds airstrips on Yemeni islands it doesn't own, fuels a genocidal militia in Sudan to suit its own ends, and still gets state visit treatment in London. Israel flattens Gaza under an ICJ order to prevent genocide, and Britain protects its backdoor supply lines through the same ports. That's not a coincidence, that's policy and practice. It's the West outsourcing dirty work to clients, then congratulating itself for keeping its hands clean. The plain truth is this: British weapons travelled further than British law was willing to follow. The export criteria says the licences stop when there's a clear risk of serious violations of humanitarian law. That threshold was crossed long ago. The government knew it. They carried on anyway, because legality can be managed and morality doesn't pay. The state didn't blunder into this and walk straight through the warning signs. And now Britain's inside the circle. Arms to the UAE feed the RSF's massacres in Darfur. The same UAE keeps Israel's war economy alive by running trade through Sudanese and Egyptian ports, while the Houthis' actions in the Red Sea remain a concern, despite it being suspended right now. Inference being, though, that Israel is going to start again in my mind. Not that many people, I don't imagine, think any differently. But London's fingerprints are on every link of this chain, intentional or not. The public line is that we're promoting stability. The real line is that we become part of a system where genocide is just a cost of doing business. Look at the pattern. Sudan's coast turned into a cargo lifeline. Egypt profits off transshipment. Presumably they're getting something out of it. The UAE builds bases and runs ports. Israel keeps trading. Britain provides the hardware and the legal cover. Nobody breaks rank because everyone's making something out of it. This is what global Britain means in practice, a weapons subcontractor with diplomatic immunity. The law's crystal clear, though, which means there's questions to answer here. The Arms Trade Treaty and the UK's own export rules say licences have to be halted when diversion or violations are likely. The 2019 Court of Appeal already told the government what that means. You can't take an ally's word for it when evidence says otherwise. But when the ally is the Emirates, the rules turn to suggestions. The Foreign Office might call it pragmatism or some other platitude, but anyone outside Westminster can see it for what it is. Selective blindness dressed up as following the rules. The calculation, sadly, is brutally simple. Lose a few billion in defence exports and anger a Gulf investor bloc, or risk being called complicit in genocide. The government knows which option costs more votes. The oil money, the property deals, the arms factories, that's the real special relationship. Sovereignty gets sold off one export licence at a time as a result. This is how empires die, not in dramatic speeches, but in routine paperwork. Britain once claimed to police the world. Now it issues export licences to whoever actually does the policing. The rhetoric hasn't changed, only the direction the guns are travelling in. The Foreign Office still talks about human rights while its own weapons show up in killing zones. A second scene of genocide, as it is now. Another one. The gap between what Britain says and what Britain does is now a chasm you can see from space. The cost is counted in people, not numbers. The UN says nearly 9 million Sudanese have been forced from their homes. 24 million need aid. Darfur's villages are disappearing. In Gaza, the ICJ says the risk of genocide is plausible and has been established as such. That's 18 months ago now. And still Britain backs the same network of partners arming both genocides. The humanitarian language is just cover for the logistics of control. So this isn't about mistakes, it's about choices. Choices made in full knowledge of where the weapons go and what they're used for. Choices that trade legal risk for political convenience. Every minister who signs off another licence to the UAE does it knowing the material can and will end up with forces committing atrocity. So will it continue? They do it because stopping would mean confronting the reality that Britain's moral authority is already gone. If Britain had any intention of applying its own rules, it would suspend the UAE licences today. It would demand an end to Emirati re-exports, shut down the base on Zukar built on stolen Yemeni soil, and make its support for Israel conditional on compliance with that ICJ order. It won't do it, though, because doing so would expose the depth of this alliance of convenience. The words rules-based order would have to be retired permanently. So the circle stays unbroken, unfortunately. Britain's industry builds, the Gulf buys, the weapons move, more civilians die, and another press release comes out calling it partnership. The paperwork is what keeps the whole thing respectable until someone breaks the story. The reality is a transnational protection racket where London is the armourer and the apologist all in one. And if nothing changes, this won't stop in Sudan. The next war will be armed the same way, justified the same way, and forgotten the same way. The phases of the victims will change. The excuses won't, though. Britain will keep preaching restraint while exporting impunity. That's not foreign policy. It's a confession with a flag shoved up its arse. The evidence is public. The law is written. The decisions are traceable. The only question left is whether Britain still thinks it can get away with pretending it doesn't know. And of course, it isn't just in arms exports this has been exposed in, but in how Britain opposes those who also call it out. Palestine Action, now regarded as a terror group for throwing paint on some planes, but the Al-Qaeda cast-offs now running Syria, who have killed 11,000 people since seizing power last December, well, they just got delisted as a terror group, didn't they? Square that hole if you can. Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation. Here is your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.